And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, a little busy today. How you doing?
You're busy. What's going on? Is this stuff happening? Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
I ran some errands, I had to get a coffee. I was over at Stop and Shop, trying to be productive today. So, checking a few things off the list. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. You can't say my day was as busy as yours. It's crazy, but in all seriousness, today is a very, very busy day. We wouldn't do a live Bruins beat if it wasn't busy. We've never done this before. We've done live streams. We have never actually done a live Bruins beat, though, because it's a big day. And it kind of came out of nowhere in a sense. I mean, we knew this stuff was all going to happen. I don't think we expected it to happen all in the same day. I think the biggest news of today is that we're doing a live Bruins beat, actually. I think that's
That
like
is
the
the
biggest
main
news.
headline. People aren't writing about it. You're not hearing it, but we're in a threat level midnight situation right here, Evan, with the amount of news on our feeds today. So, a fitting thing to knock out all this news at once.
The mainstream media won't tell you this. The mainstream media won't tell you these things. We will. The mainstream media won't. Let's dive into it. So the Bruins signed Patrice Bergeron, 1-year deal, 2.5 million base, 2.5 million in incentives. You were right in that the incentives would be very, very low.
Shocking.
10 games played. They're gonna wrap Bergeron a bubble wrap for that 10th when he gets to his 10th game, or at least he is. Bruins then a few hours later signed David Krejci, 1 year, 1 million base, 2 million in incentives. And then just before we came on air here, Bruins signed Pavel Zacha 1 year, 3.5 million prior to the arbitration hearing that was supposed to be August 11th. So lots of things. We will start with Bergeron though. What are like to me again? The money doesn't surprise me. The incentives don't surprise me. The years don't surprise me. The only surprise is that it took this long to happen.
Yeah, and I think that all just comes down to, I think, for the Bruins, it's been mapped out for over a month now that Bergeron was coming back. It seemed very likely that Krejci was going to come back. I think it all was going to just come down to what the actual dollars and cents were going to be on these contracts. And as we've talked about countless times before, as we waited for actual news to kind of hit our feeds over the last month, whatever they were going to sign, Bergeron and Krejci was probably going to be low salary, heavily incentive based. But I think it did kind of surprise me just how low these were, especially Krejci, but Bergeron himself. I mean, 2.5 million for a guy who went out last year, 36 years old, and had probably the best defensive season from a forward in years. Like probably Bergeron's best overall defensive season. We're talking about a guy who's arguably the best defensive forward in NHL history. So
Yes.
just the fact that I think the Bruins are able to sign him to a affordable deal like that. Again, not surprising. Like I think we first got the notification that I think what did they post, like a gif of him like smiling or
Winking.
something, yeah, winking. As soon as it happened, I was like, that's about right. But then once you see, I think the bigger picture in terms of what he signed for and how much he, once again, as he's done countless times before, doing the Bruins a solid in terms of fixing their kind of tough cap situation they find themselves in. It's nothing but a plus for the Bruins, who obviously they're trying to go for it at least one more year. And if you have a guy like Bergeron in place as your 1C, as your defensive stopper for where he kind of fits into the big picture, it's nothing but a plus for this Bruins team, even if it is just a short-term measure.
Yeah, again, you're getting a number one center for 2.5 million as a cap hit. That's incredible. I mean, again, like we knew he would. I mean, there were some reports out there that he might want more. But again, I mean, I'll read this quote to you. The had at his press conference. I've made more money than I ever thought I would in hockey. Leaving a few dollars on the table to make sure you're a good team and make sure you're a competitive team for years to come is what I've wanted to do. That's something that started here before me. That is quite impressive to hear, especially considering he's 37. He could easily have said, no, I want a lot more money than this. I don't want incentives. I want like real tangible money. Especially as you said, like he's not showing any signs of decline. Like I know we kind of sat here and said, oh, he's 37. He may maybe not score as many points as he did in past seasons, or, this year he's not going to have Marchand to start the year. But the dude deserves every penny he gets. And again, I think it just comes down to how one day can kind of not revitalize a franchise, but like completely turn the narrative. I think everybody forgets now they have all those injuries to start the year. It's like, oh, good, no more Connor Bedard.
Push it
They
down,
don't need
yeah.
Connor Bedard. We don't need that. By the way, whoever Ryan M is on YouTube, I see the comments on the right side. Pastrnak 8 years, 88 million per Friedman. I actually had to look that up. because I was like, man, maybe he's
Is
got a
that what
point. So
that pause was, as like the sinking fear? I thought that was going to be your dream though, Evan. Is one time we actually record something live and
well,
actually have you
I
break.
immediately ran to Twitter because I was like, oh my god, is he serious? Like, did they actually just do that? Because you know what? Today, like that is a thing that could easily happen. As people have said, it's August 8th, so 8/8. Maybe it's meant to be. But I think with Bergeron, what's interesting is, again, I am curious to see what he is. I am curious to see what he looks like without Marchand on his left side. I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to start the year because I think it'll probably be maybe Hall or Zacha on that left
Mhm.
side. And again, I know we'll get to Zacha in a bit. Who would your pick be? I know in training camp it's going to get hashed up, but who would your pick be to be on the left side of Bergeron to start the year?
I would probably imagine it's probably going to be a guy like DeBrusque. I think when you look at, obviously he found a lot of success this past season over the final stretch on the right side, but I think when you look at him and who's a guy like DeBrusque who's been revitalized, I think wanting to stick with Boston now with the coaching change, with the way he ended last year. I think if you're the Bruins, you stick him back to his normal spot at left wing, keep him with Bergeron and kind of get the ball rolling there. And when Marchand does come back, it's a great problem to have if DeBrusque is playing well, because then you just slot him to the right side and you could probably have a very effective, top line there. Because also I think it's not only the fact that you want to get DeBrusque rolling, but all right, David Krejci, still a very, very good playmaker. Still a year removed from the NHL. I would, if I'm them, I want to keep him with Hall, who was fantastic with Krejci last year, and keep those guys together,
Yes,
and just
and
let it
Pastrnak.
and with Pastrnak as well, and just let them roll through like that. So it's a good problem to have if you're the Bruins and Jim Montgomery, because also they very well could just reunite eventually Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak too. Like he's got many good options he can turn to if that's the case once guys are healthy. But I think to start the year, if it's Bergeron with DeBrusque and insert player here, pretty good way to build up a line, especially if you have guys like Hall, Krejci, and Pasta further down in the lineup there.
Yeah, it's funny. One YouTube commenter mentions potentially Lysell with Bergeron, which could. I mean, we did prospects on Thursday. We did say to temper expectations. We did say that, but at the same time, you really don't know. Just given his development that he could have in camp. Another piece of Bruins news today: Bruins signed David Krejci again. As I said, a year, 1 year, 1 million, 2 million in incentives. What I'm so curious about with this, I did not. I know in his farewell post that he was going back to the Czech Republic literally like a year ago. At the end, it said, this might not be goodbye forever. Like, but I always thought, if he's moving his family to the Czech Republic and he's going home, I wouldn't expect him to come back even during the year. Like, remember the amount of times we talked about during last season? Like, when's
Mhm.
Krejci coming back? Is he going to be out there at Warrior just skating around? But now I'm kind of surprised. Now I'm not surprised he came back because of all the stuff we've heard this summer. But I'm surprised in general that he came back to Boston, given that he moved his family to the Czech. And again, a million to pay 3.5 million in cap for your 1 and 2 centers is pretty good. But I'm just kind of surprised he came back.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I think you look at his 1 year back home and how important that was to him, but it's kind of like when you go abroad for a year, right, in college, right? Like, it's just part of the experience. It's something that I think he was glad and thankful he was able to do last year, or bringing his family back there, playing for, his hometown team, and of course having a great season overseas there as well. But I think if you're Krejci, you're probably looking at finally kind of going full circle, coming back to the only team you played for in the NHL level, coming back for one more year. You have to imagine it has the feel of one last run with a guy like Bergeron. So I think for him, it's all about checked off the one thing that you haven't done yet in your career. At that point, if you're David Krejci, in terms of going back overseas and finishing out a year. So if he was able to do that and then come back for one last run where he's most likely going to have Taylor Hall and David Pastrnak on his line, pretty good way to cap things off, right? So I think it was definitely, it's not the most streamlined or easy to chart out career in terms of like the way he's kind of jumped around a little bit, but I think for him it's all about kind of having that finality of coming back to the Bruins and helping them out over, again, is this team a top tier contender? Remains to be seen. We'll see how they are, especially in the early going with the amount of injuries they have. But I think for him, just the opportunity to play with the guys that he's played with for over a decade now, one more time, was a pretty appealing offer for what, especially considering what he signed for, right? Like, it's not like you had to throw a bunch of money at him. The fact that it was only a $1 million base salary, okay, he had some incentive wanting to come back here.
Yeah, and I also think an interesting thing with Krejci is Bruce Cassidy is gone. Now, again, we'll talk to Krejci on tomorrow, Tuesday. I would not expect him to come out and be like, "Oh yeah, I actually came back because Bruce Cassidy's gone." So don't expect that. But I remember his comments when he first went to the Czech Republic, and he was like, "Oh, like now David Pastrnak's on the second line. Like I couldn't have got that treatment." I do think I know that Cassidy was not let go, or at least publicly was not let go because he needs to be let go if Bergeron and Krejci are to come back. But I do think it's a legitimate question to ask of like how much of him leaving is why Bergeron and specifically Krejci are just now back.
Yeah, again, as you said, I doubt we'll get a cut and dry answer from Krejci in that regard, but I think you can I think especially in Krejci's case, like, I don't think Bergeron was necessarily something that was going to be dictated based on the coaching change or anything like that. But yeah, as you said, David Krejci straight up said it during his time in the Czech Republic, of the need for more support, more offensive weapons. Is something we talked about for years and years with Krejci in terms of who they kind of threw on that second line with him. So now he comes back in a situation where you now have him, who again kind of remains to be seen if he's still the same elite level player. But hey, you have Taylor Hall and David Pastrnak to his left and right. I think it's safe to assume they're going to be pretty productive, right? So I do think maybe some of that had an impact on Krejci, who just from the timing of it, going from overseas in Europe for 1 year, you fire the coach, you probably have two high-powered weapons on your line. He comes back, kind of put two to two together, right? This isn't like True Detective where there's some great conspiracy here. It's kind of one thing kind of follows the other here in terms of way David Krejci's coming back. So I think for him, he's definitely motivated to come back and kind of get an actual legit kind of weapons with him on that line, because it makes plenty of sense in terms of why he'd want to sacrifice and only put down $1 million in base salary for next year.
It's funny, Connor. I think a lot of Bruins fans felt really good this morning because the Bergeron news came out right early in the morning. That the gif of him winking, you knew he was coming back. But when you want to feel good every morning, I want to tell you about our next partner that has a product I use literally every day. I started taking Athletic Greens because I wanted better gut health and more energy. I do not drink coffee. So while you went out and got coffee this morning, I do not drink coffee. I also don't use caffeine, which a lot of people are surprised by. Every week, people are surprised I say this because I want healthier natural energy, and AG1 is providing it in droves. It doesn't taste like it's super healthy or anything either. It has a mild tropical taste that I actually look forward to every single morning. So, what is this stuff? Well, one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75, count them, 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced ingredients, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things you could need. It does. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy free, or gluten free. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting really good. This all supports better sleep quality and mental clarity. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day, and that is it. That is quite literally it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1 year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Bruins. Again, athleticgreens.com/Bruins. You can see it on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. So, speaking of adding some insurance, at least in the middle, Shako Mako brings up a good point. Athletic Greens, where the nutrition starts. Where the nutrition starts. That's genius right there. That
Well
is
done.
absolutely
Little
terrific.
golf clap.
I
Good
like
job.
that. We have really creative listeners. I will always respect that. The other piece of insurance the Bruins news did today was they signed Pavel Zacha, 1 year, $3.5 million. I'm surprised at the length. I thought it would be a 2 or 3 year deal, just given Sweeney had talked up his potential. The $3.5 million though, that's not bad. That's really not bad, because I remember we both kind of were a little afraid, like, it's going to be a 5 year deal worth $5 million per year. 3.5 is not too bad.
Yeah, no, I think when you look at the situation, I think I'm kind of with you, Evan, in terms of not a huge fan of the term. I have to imagine, considering that they settled before they got to arbitration, that Zacha clearly wanted to either have a prove it deal or was asking for maybe more than the Bruins were expecting. So I think you kind of bridge that gap by signing him to a 1 year prove it deal that at the end of this year will have him be a UFA and he can kind of bet on himself. That being said, it's also you run the risk of him finally kind of putting it all together, right? He's never been a guy that's going to give you 45, 50 points in a season. But if he does take that huge step forward this year, and who knows whether he's in a top six role on the wing, if he's with Charlie Coyle on the third line, wherever he is, there stands a pretty good chance that he takes another promising step forward. So if he puts together a really strong year and he's asking for 4 or 5 years next year at 4.5 million, 5 million, then you're kind of in a pickle if you're the Bruins because who knows what kind of happens then, whether it's is Bergeron and Krejci back? If not, those bonus overages are carrying over till next year. You have a whole lot of other guys that are hitting free agency, so it's very risky for the Bruins in terms of trading for a guy like Zaka that is kind of operating on this 1 year kind of prove it kind of contract. But in terms of you can kind of flip that narrative as well and say that it gives the Bruins flexibility that if he doesn't work out or if they're trying to completely, go for a clean slate next year with so much money coming off the books that, all right, even if Zaka has a solid year, if you just don't want to retain him and want to start fresh and build around for the future, you have that option as well. So it's all kind of depends on how you want to interpret the long-term plans for the Bruins, which I think when you look at the news from today, which I think Bruins fans are excited about, it lessens the issue of looking a little bit further down the road because even with Bergeron and Krejci coming back, you look at 2024, 25, uh, not great, but again, let the good times roll for at least today, and then we can ponder those tougher situations a little bit further down the road, I'd say.
They just keep putting those short-term extensions on like each year. Like, oh, maybe next year will be bad. No, 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 it'll be good enough. It'll be good enough. So one thing I want to hit on that kind of all this leads to is like how much better are they? Because again, cap space wise, according to Cap Friendly, they are negative 2.241 million, which again can be fixed with the LTIR. Maybe they move off some cap space when those guys return. So I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't think that they're going to like deal Mike Riley anytime soon for this or anything like that. Maybe they do, but I don't really see them doing it just given that they have the LTIR there. But when it comes to their playoff hopes, because I know I see some comments on it, it's a huge thing everyone's kind of thinking about is like, where does this put them? Where does this put them in the Atlantic? And to me, I don't think it. I think all along we've expected this, so I don't think this is like, whoa, this came out of nowhere.
Right.
This has changed the game. Again, it's going to come down to those the most pivotal months of the year, and this sounds terrible, might be the first 1 to 2 months because that if they can tread water through that, if they can be safely above 500 during that, if they can retain either a wild card spot or like right underneath it, you're in good shape because once Marchand comes back and McAvoy and Grzelcyk, you have a full team. And that full team, at fully healthy, should be third, at worst, fourth in the Atlantic,
Yeah.
I
No.
think.
Yeah. No. I agree. I think it's one of those things where does it necessarily move the needle enough that they're in that upper echelon of contenders like Colorado? No. Right. I think you still have to worry about those kind of teams waiting at the end of the road there, but as you said, I think it's all going to come down to how they fare out of the gate, which is a big ask for this team. Not only is it the fact that you're missing guys like Marchand, you're missing guys like McAvoy and Grzelcyk. The schedule's pretty tough in the start of the year, right? We
Yes.
we talked about that stretch they have in November where they play like Colorado twice, Tampa, Carolina. It's some brutal stretch there, right around when I think Marchand and McAvoy should come back. That all right, it's one thing if you're kind of treading water, but what if you're 10 and 18 at that point of the season, right? That's when things get a little bit tougher in terms of how you're going to navigate that. And who knows, they can go on a deep run once everyone's healthy and able to roll into the playoffs. But as we say every year, a lot can change over the course of an NHL season. You have injuries that pop up, you have other developments, all these hurdles you have to clear. So are the Bruins better than they were last year? When healthy, I would say so, just because I think if Krejci is the same player he was, let's say his last year with the Bruins when he had Taylor Hall, and he should be at that same level this year if he has a guy like David Pastrnak on his line. they'll be right in the mix, right? Like, again, you can look at other factors that could help them out. Does Jeremy Swayman take another big step forward, which would be a huge plus for them? I don't think Charlie McAvoy, as great as he is, his ceiling's been necessarily hit yet. Will you have guys like Brendan Carlo bounce back maybe into Jim Montgomery's system? Is Jake DeBrus build off of last year?
Hampus Lindholm.
Hampus Lindholm, a full year with him and how he works out. You have guys like Grizzlick, who was injured last year. Does he take it? You've got so many other factors that can kind of either, improve this team or hurt them in terms of just what steps they going forward. Because you have so many guys, even last year, for as much as the usual suspects kind of led the charge once again for the Bruins, you had also guys that were either scuffling, that weren't able to help get that team to its full potential. So are they going to be in the mix? Yep. And that's sometimes with a game like hockey, that's all you kind of need to be in that mix and go on a run. But you look at the amount of supporting casts on this team that can and should hopefully at least either rebound and get back to their usual level of play or could take steps forward. If you're a Bruins fan, at the very least, you should be encouraged because for at least one more year, you're going to have a competitive team that hopefully will be able to play for some meaningful games once we get to April and May.
Yeah, and again, I mean, you look at the division, right? Better than the Sabres, better than the Canadiens, better than the Red Wings. Not really debatable. Senators, I would say you're much better than. I know the Senators made some big additions, but I think on paper you're better. So it really comes down to Toronto. And Toronto is brutal in net. That's the one thing. They're just not good at net. And again, it wouldn't surprise me if Toronto, just given your injuries at the beginning of the year, gains points on you and finishes above you in the standings. But I mean, again, their goaltending situation is not great. So again, I look at that and I say that's where you want. Your target spot in the Atlantic is third or fourth. Also, getting this extra offense down the middle with Bergeron and Krejci helps you against a team like Florida, who's really bad on defense, who is not good, who took steps back in that in the Matthew Tkachuk trade. So again, suddenly you're now in the mix more, which is a good thing for them. Because again, I think, there was also a part of me that when I saw the Bergeron news, I thought to myself, what if Krejci doesn't come back? Because I thought they'd announce them together. I thought they would just do they'd put them together. They basically did. Who's news? Who benefits the most from today's news?
What was that, Evan?
Jim Montgomery. Jim Montgomery benefits the most from today's news because, again, coming in as a new head coach, he mentioned in his introductory presser that Bergeron is basically like a coach in the room. He talked to him already. He, wanted him in there, all those things. I think this eases the transition. And again, Montgomery's a player's coach. If he lets Bergeron and Krejci and those guys kind of run the room, that's not a bad group to be letting run the room, So I think for him, it's a lot better knowing he's going to have a legit number one and number two center. And also that you're going to have this veteran leadership in there. I know it sounds like corny, but I do think it really matters, especially with the new head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of the same thing that Bruce Cassidy talked about all these years ago, right? When he first started off there in terms of how much of a plus it is as any coach going into a new situation where you got to learn the players and try to hammer down a new system or get guys playing to your style of play. It helps when also you have, these veteran cornerstones in the room that you can turn to that, all right, you're already going to be busy installing systems and going over film and hammering home your kind of message. It's another plus to be able to turn to the veterans in the room and have them kind of run those things as well. So yeah, as you said, it's going to be a huge plus for Montgomery that he can turn to guys like Bergeron and Krejci and even, guys that have been around for a while now, even Carlo, Coyle, all these other guys. Like they've got a very strong supporting cast there. And by having guys like Bergeron and Krejci and Martian in place, the Bruins, even though sooner or later they're going to have to, get a clean slate and build for the future. The identity that, Bergeron and these guys did such a good job of cultivating and fostering years ago, it's still in place, right? Like you've got a new coach, you've got younger players added to the mix, but as long as those guys are still there leading the way, there's still going to be the same kind of Bruins team in terms of the identity and the principles they kind of work and operate with. So, yeah, as you said, for Montgomery, who's already got his work cut out for him, it just makes it that much easier in terms of, stepping into that room and kind of taking over the ship this upcoming season.
Yeah, see, I'm seeing a question from a YouTube commenter. Momo Adomo asks, can the Bruins afford Kadri? And the answer is no. Not anymore. It
Not
really
anymore.
is not happening. You don't also need Nazem Kadri. They don't need Nazem Kadri. That's the other thing. Like they've got 1 and 2. They don't need him right now. I mean, if he was young, again, if Nazem Kadri was the level he was and he was like 25, first of all, he'd already be scooped up by now. So that's like a whole nother thing. But like maybe you'd go for him. Because again, the future down the middle, I mean, we did prospects on Poke the Bear last week, and there are some encouraging guys in there that could potentially maybe be number ones and number twos at center. I still think it's the biggest issue this team faces is like
Yes.
who is kind of taking over for Bergeron and Krejci. I mean, the fact that a year after Krejci leaves, this team still needs to call David Krejci and bring him back is, is a thing that is sort of an issue and speaks to the development. But I don't think it's just us kind of, not thinking, but I do think that they have guys in the system who could potentially down the line be number one and number two centers. Now, again, are they going to take over for Bergeron perfectly and Krejci perfectly? No, probably not. But again, if you need them for a bridge, whatever it might be, I do think, guys like Brett Harrison, and I know he's bad defensively, but like Georgi Merkulov, and I think that there's some excitement there. I also want to say the Mason Lohrei interview, I saw someone ask about this. I think that will either go like this weekend or it'll be Bruins beat next week. It was supposed to be. It was supposed to go Tuesday. It was supposed to go tomorrow. But this kind of took precedent just because big news, huge
Yeah.
news. So all this news happens. Do you have any other like big thoughts from this? Like takeaways that you had or surprises? Were you surprised by any of this?
Yeah, I don't think it's any real surprise other than maybe just the fact that I thought this was going to be a situation where, with them signing these contracts, I thought he was looking at least 3.5 million for each guy in terms of base salary, and I thought this was going to be a situation where, if they weren't having any moves in terms of moving a guy like Riley or Felino or anything like that, they were going to be entering training camp with $5-6 million over the cap. So now that you're in a situation where all those guys are signed, and you're looking at, what is it? I think like 2.5, maybe 2.2 million over the cap.
I think
Again,
it's
you have to get
2.2.
under that at some point, but it's not an insurmountable kind of mountain to get over now. It's not like you're moving multiple players out
It's not
or
like you're
you have.
Vegas.
Exactly. It's not like Vegas or anything like that. So again, you don't want to be dealing with kind of cap jail in terms of getting under it. But for the Bruins, in terms of what both Bergeron and Krejci did as a solid for the team, it's going to be probably at least one player, and that's about it in terms of getting under that cap limit and still fielding what should be, when healthy, a pretty solid roster.
Brad Marchand has tweeted. He has
I
logged
did
on
see
to
that.
twitter.com. It is just the emoji of the water. That was it.
Yes.
Just wet, I guess. Good for him. Yeah, he's
Good for Brad.
kicking on there. Gotta love it.
We don't have
Good
to.
for
No one has
Brad.
to retake Brad. We have his comment.
We can put that in a story.
Yes.
Quote that emoji, Marchand said Monday on Twitter. Another interesting thing that everyone's kind of waiting for, the last thing that people are kind of questioning is David Pastrnak's extension. Now, again, this would have been the perfect day to announce it, but I guess you have to they got to save some news for other days. You can't just do everything in one fell swoop, which they basically have
They
done.
tried. They
Sweeney's like, you
tried
know
it.
what? Sweeney's like, you know what? We're doing all our work today. You guys have the rest of the summer off. You're going to work like a 17-hour day today, but you got to, just today. But the Pastrnak extension, again, I think we have said that it would be kind of worrisome if they go into training camp without something done. I would expect something soon, right?
I mean, I think the main concern wouldn't be training camp; it'd be going into the regular season. Like
Yes.
I
Regular, not
imagine,
training camp. I meant regular
yeah,
season.
I imagine the timeline is maybe they take a little bit of a break now and revisit it once guys are all back at Warrior. You're able to talk to him daily and try to hammer things out. I imagine that's something they focus on around the time of camp opening up. Again, things can change in a hurry. All it takes is Pastrnak to see these guys signed and want to commit to this team for the long haul, which I think is what the Bruins would love to have happen. But I think, yeah, as you said, it's only a real issue, I think, is if you're going into the middle of October, you have actual games starting up, and that's when you hit a point where a guy like Pastrnak just wants to table it to this upcoming summer, which, if you're the Bruins, that is a hell of a risky a play to roll through in terms of this is a team that is trying to go for it this year. You don't know what the future holds beyond that. You run the risk of a guy like Pastrnak hitting free agency where he's going to get paid by some team next summer. That's when you run into the issue, right? Of having the narrative of what you're going to do with Pastrnak, where this team is at the deadline if things go haywire with injuries or what have you, and you have to worry about what to do with a guy like Pastrnak. I think in terms of just getting rid of those narratives and checking off what should be at the top of the Bruins list now in terms of both the short term and long term success of this franchise, it's going to be trying to bridge that gap and get Pastrnak to sign a deal probably around those 2 weeks around training camp.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think a lot of people are hoping that he's signing today or tomorrow or this week, but I do think there's some patience required. Again, I don't expect him to sign anywhere else. I don't expect him to come to the negotiating table and say, I'm not coming back. I don't want to come back. Because again, remember how dreary, I guess, things were at the beginning of the offseason when it was like, he may not come back. He's upset with everything. And now it seems like things have at least gotten a little bit better, or a lot better, actually, because again, we're not hearing any of those reports. So lots happened today. Lots happened. What can the people look forward to from you over at BSJ?
Yep, Evan will continue to break down, get all the takeaways from all the news from today with Bergeron, Krejci, and Zacha. Again, we'll have more comments and stories coming out the next couple of days once Zacha and Krejci both speak to us. Don Sweeney's going to be speaking to the media on Wednesday, so there'll be plenty of takeaways from that as well. So, again, every single day over at BSJ, we'll have tons of Bruins content throughout this summer going into the 2022-23 season. So please subscribe over at BSJ. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all that. And remember, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and put on daily notifications so you'll always know when we have videos coming out. But anyways, I'm Evan Marinofsky. You listen to Bruins Beat, and you Bruins Beat listeners have a great rest